Keegan, thanks for taking some time to join me on the Gravity Podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brett. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that we can get some time together today.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited actually to hear your story and just having an opportunity to get to know you a little bit through Coach and seeing you work and the success that you're having. And really, I think for me personally, I just like the way you go about it. So it's relatable, and you're bringing a different vibe to law and and maybe patent in general has that kind of IP has that sort of maybe more natural lane for you to be unique. I don't know, but you're unique in your field for sure, and very relatable, and just excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that I get the opportunity to chat today, and thanks for having me come on. I have like a handful of like friends now that are in the Columbus, Ohio area, which is really random because I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and I spend a decent amount of time in LA. Yeah. But I have like 3 or 4 like wonderful entrepreneur friends that are in the Columbus, Ohio area, and then I actually have a close friend here in Boston who has a multi-family family office, and like 3 of his, main clients that have, several $100 million or whatever are in Columbus, and he goes there all the time. And so he and I have even talked about that recently. So it's just a kind of a random note or whatever, but I just think it's cool. I mean, there's amazing stuff happening in Columbus, and you're a big part of that, man. So
thanks. Yeah, it's a city that's getting on a lot of people's radar now, and that's fun for us. And we'll have to connect some dots on that and get you here and show you around and have a good time.
I'm sure that you and this other guy know some of the same people because he's doing some development, maybe apartment complex development sort of things in also. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I'd love to connect with them, and sure we have a lot of mutual friends in common.
I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's start at the beginning of your journey. I want to know, where are you from? What was little Keegan like? Your family, just all the kind of tell me about the dynamics of growing up as a kid.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess I'll start by just saying how grateful that I am to be able to do things like this, to be on podcasts, to be able to be invited on podcasts. And a lot of that has been due to the love that I've received from my family, right? As I'm sure we'll talk about today, it hasn't been the most straightforward path to be where I am today. And there's been some definite bumps in the road. And I definitely, had a period in my life where I hurt a lot of people that I cared about. And unfortunately, a lot of those people were the people that were closest to me. And but they've always been loving and supportive. And I'm profoundly grateful for that. So now I'll talk trash about them. Okay.
Oh no, that's good. That's good. I'm excited to learn more about all of that, really, because I've learned in doing this podcast, there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of love, and both just seem to be pretty common paths for most people.
Yeah. So I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was born in Mesa, Arizona, or maybe Scottsdale. I guess we were living in Scottsdale. I was born in Mesa, Desert Samaritan Hospital, April 20th, 1979. And but we only lived there for maybe until I was 2 years old, and then we moved back to Michigan, which is where my folks grew up. Was in Southwest Michigan, the Kalamazoo, Michigan area, and Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, and so we had moved back there because they both come from very large, Irish Catholic families. We come from what I always describe as a long line of overbreeders, and so there's just there's so many of us, but we're all pretty close. And so I think I have 52 first cousins, and my dad was one of 9, and my mom is one of seven. And then, so I mean, I have more aunts and uncles than I have most people have, family period, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Wow.
there was a lot of us. So it made sense for my mom to want to move back to Michigan. And so that was where I grew up. That's where I went to elementary school, middle school, and did high school there. And like I said, I was the oldest of five. My mom worked at the post office, I think, since she was 18. I think so. Her literal whole career was post office, and then my dad is like a skilled tradesman, right? So he had worked as a carpenter things were definitely tough when we first moved from Arizona to Michigan, and I was very young then, so I barely remember it. But once I get to the age of like around like 5 until 10 years old, like it was definitely like a financially tough time. My dad mainly worked as a framer, for like on a crew of framers, building houses or apartment complexes or whatever, and they kept having babies, and so it was a lot of children to take care of on
Sure.
Without that much money, and so definitely things were tight. But when you're a kid, you don't really have any perspective of that, right? It's just that's what you know. You don't have that much perspective until you really. So, gosh, we had like this tiny little house on a nice little street. Things were reasonably, I don't know, normal growing up, I guess. I mean, there was, it was like the early 80s. I think that there was a lot more like maybe open air substance use.
Yeah. Well, tell me about I am curious. So yeah, you say that you were a kid and, times were tough, for your parents, but, they seem to do a fairly good job of, I don't know, keeping that from you or not making that feel too much a part of the experience. I don't know. Is that true? I mean, when you think about it, was there a sense that really, it was tough, or what was it like? And maybe just expand a little bit more on like
not really.
what you were like.
Not until I was in high school.
Okay.
Until I was in high school that then I like started to realize that I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I guess that things are a little tighter for us at home than a lot of other. Yeah.
And so tell me more about like what kind of kid you were, what you were interested in or into, and sure, substance, is there, you start to party, act out, like what? Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I've always been an outgoing kid, like to, chat it up with everybody. That was something that I definitely inherited from my dad. He's got the gift of gab, for better or for worse, whenever we're like when I bring him to the city, for instance, like when he comes to Boston, I have to be like that. You don't have to talk with every homeless person for like he just can't help himself.
Yeah,
like, hey, how you doing?
Right.
What's going on? You're like you don't have to stop giving me all these guys money. He's just, he's the man of the people. That's what he likes. And he'll connect with anyone. And I think that's just part of the gift of being from a really big family. And so you end up having people that are from really all walks of life within your family that you're very comfortable with, so because you'll have people that are, have done very well and are quite successful. Then you'll have others that, have that have maybe faced a lot of different challenges, self-inflicted or otherwise. And, but you can still find ways to connect with them. And so I think that was actually, I'm grateful for having a big family. There was a before I maybe wasn't, like as a teenager, because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And you could never get away with anything, right? Because there was always someone around every corner, right? But I played sports and did, even though we didn't have a lot, we didn't really go, right? So I played sports, I mainly played I think I was the best at hockey. And I played at baseball, into high school. And I played tennis also in high school. And I even played like a little bit of football, but I didn't play football in high school. I just played that up until high school. And then I stopped that at that point. But I'd say that, things, ultimately did change for me. Part of my story arc involves substance abuse. And when I was like a good student, right? So like, it was like pretty much like an A student with some B's sprinkled in here and there. And by the time I got to high school, I think I just wasn't feeling particularly challenged. And I also think, and this is like decades of analysis.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Relying on to make these sort of overarching like assertions at this point. But I would say that I just didn't know. I didn't have great tools for dealing with like general life emotions, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't think many of us do as a teenager anyways, but I
agree.
Think maybe it was maybe a little underprepared. Maybe some other folks have a little bit more tools in the toolbox there.
Yeah.
Just,
well, let me ask you a question about that. Cause boy, I have been saying for years now that we just don't teach children the right things in school, and that we teach nothing about emotion. We teach nothing about really life. I mean, we teach, things that are sort of skills at best, and maybe there's some learning in there, but most of my education was about life through living, and the academics just, never really landed with me. And so, when you say that you didn't have those skills and maybe some people were better prepared, and I know this is in hindsight and after a lot of work and analysis, why do you think that is? Why do you think that was?
I think part of it was because we had a big family and I had two, like, my parents are very hard workers, right? Like not only, one of them always had two full-time jobs. Right? So like, and that's not an exaggeration. Like there was a long period where my dad worked as a framer during the day, and then he worked a second full-time job at night as a janitor. And then there was also, or he'd be doing side jobs or, all kinds. He was always doing side jobs no matter what. And then there was also a long period of, like over a decade where my mom worked at the post office during the day, where she worked her whole career. And then she also worked for Pfizer on the line. She worked third shift on the line at Pfizer. And then, so from 11 until 7, and then she'd go drive to her post office. She was a postmaster at the Plenty Post Office, and then she'd work all day there and go sleep for a few hours and get up and do it again at 11 o'clock at night. So I think that with 5 children and sports and all these things going on, that I just, didn't maybe get like one-on-one.
Yeah. I gotcha.
To help deal with some of those feelings. I don't think it was like intentional or anything.
Sure.
Like that, but it was just a, a consequence of
the circumstance. Yeah.
Circumstance. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So
glad you brought this up though. Cause I was just thinking about this morning in view of like, and since I have a little bit of a platform, I feel like I want to think about it.
Go for it. Yeah.
But like, I was thinking about it like this morning, cause there was this rapper that was shot in this group called Ghost or whatever, and outside of a bowling alley like yesterday or the day before.
I saw that.
And like I love a couple of their songs; they're great, right? And but there's like every like few months, there's like some new guy like getting shot or something over something like stupid, like playing dice, or it's an ego thing, is what it comes down to. That I think, it's like someone's got a puff out and we're like someone's trying to compensate for something that they didn't have anyways, right?
Yeah.
And and like to me, and I know this is like oversimplifying things, but I was just like, I just feel like there's this element of love that's missing from these, like we just,
Yeah.
if there was more of a teaching and focus, like you said, like in the beginning,
Yeah.
like, are we teaching the right things to people? Like I feel personally, because I practice this each day in my life, being focused on loving all people.
Yeah.
That if we can, I think in general as humans, just focus on, finding the commonalities between each other rather than focusing on the differences. I know in my own personal life, I've gotten so much freedom from that than to be focused on like, well, I don't know. I can't think of a good example. But like, Brett's got a cool rug. I wish I had that rug or something like that.
Right. Well, it's funny. I mean, that's a good example because, like, I think what happens, even if you're aware of it and you have that belief, which I share with you, you can see how things like smuggle their way in, and you're like, well, but if I do this and I have that, and then, and then you get into the competitive situation, or right, your ego finds a way to smuggle its way back in. And I think you're really onto something, that core foundation of love and learning about how to, be in the world and be with yourself and be with all of your emotions is really lacking. And it's leading to all kinds, it has for many, many years, but it's leading to a lot of mental health problems and
tragedy,
death and tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the same thought stream that I was having this morning. It wasn't just like with, like these young hip hop guys, like, shooting each other all the time. It was like, you can go a few blocks. I mean, I live in a very nice neighborhood in old brownstone in Boston, but you can go like a half mile away from my house and there's a huge encampment of folks that are out on the street. That, it's just addicts everywhere. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And folks that are, like definitely substance dependent, and the police are sitting there waiting for people to OD, and then they'll go, Narcan them or whatever and bring them back to life or whatever. But I think that's the same thing. And from my own personal experience, I think that a lot of that applies, because I think like in our core as humans, we just want to love and be loved. Right.
Yeah.
And that if we're not getting that, then sometimes we seek things outside of ourselves.
Right.
To get some comfort, or self-medicate, as they say, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that often it's a slippery slope.
Oh dear boy.
The next thing you know, you end up out in a tent on Mass Ave here in Boston, or wherever. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you say, I think that today more than ever that the stakes are really high. And like with the so the flooding of fentanyl in the streets of America and probably all over the world. I just don't see the news on that stuff. It's people don't know in their body, like, is this the day that this is my last day? You know what I mean? And it's really, I heard something recently, and I don't know, you would probably know, but it was that like more young people are losing their lives to like overdoses than anything else right now. Is that, have you heard that?
Well, I just had Beth Weinstock on my podcast. She lost her son to fentanyl, murder really is what it is. And fentanyl, not just drug overdoses. And she really makes the distinction that they're murders, which is right, because, people don't think when they're taking a Xanax or sniffing a line of coke that they're going to be dying.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. And so, but yeah, it's the leading cause of fentanyl deaths is the leading cause of death, ages 18 to 45 in the country over everything. Yeah. And that doesn't even take into account the other drug overdoses. That's just fentanyl deaths. It's over 100,000 people are going to die from fentanyl deaths in this country. It's like wild. So, that's a whole separate issue. but you're right. I mean, what people are doing to feel something that's missing, right, is and you and I both know, being in a bunch of entrepreneurial rooms and masterminds, sometimes there are healthier addictions than others, right? If you're addicted to your work, I mean, maybe you could have a heart attack. It's probably not going to kill you. If you're addicted to Instagram, it could screw some things up. But if you're into pills and powders, I mean, today, there's a decent chance you're dying.
Yeah, your life expectancy isn't great either way, absent the like a thing like fentanyl. But with that, when you throw that into the equation, then it's just the numbers go crazy, right?
Yeah.
Your odds are not great, and you don't know when. I think I definitely agree with that murder assessment. Because it doesn't make sense. It's for some.
I know.
As an entrepreneur, it doesn't really make sense.
Oh, it's the worst business model
you're just
ever.
Like, why are you? It's like,
why would you kill your clients? Yeah,
it's the craziest thing ever. It's the one thing I know in my own business is like, if I do a good job for 10 people, like one person tells them, right? And if I do a bad job for one person, they tell everybody,
right.
We're like, if you're killing your clients, there's no repeat business. You know what I mean? So we want to treat everyone good so we can do this thing for decades.
Yeah, it's hard to make sense of. Yeah,
maybe it's there's always pain and people just keep coming back. But anyways,
maybe that could be it too. It's sick, and maybe that sickness originates at somebody else's pain. But let me circle back around to your
we got off
journey.
track.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we're
so
both
I'm in
passionate.
high school.
Well, I mean, it's fine because this is the way I like to just be in conversation with people, and we have shared passion there. But I'm curious to hear what led you to this passion, and you talked about your own substance abuse, so maybe you could just expand on that.
I'm happy to chat about it, and I feel I should even note a disclaimer at the beginning that I feel like a personal really responsibility at this point in my life to share a little bit about it. Where for a long time I think that I wanted to fly underneath the radar, because I was decent things together, and I didn't want the stigma of having those things in my life, and was maybe getting my own comfort with that.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone the comfort of being able to do that. But I've been very fortunate and have really turned things around, and have had a lot of business successes. And now I feel like, on behalf of a lot of the folks that helped me along the way, that I need to speak up and let things know how bad things got and how good they can get. So, I was, in high school like anyone else. People are, drinking and smoking a little bit of weed here and there. And there was a lot of drinking in my house. And so so it wasn't real popular. I didn't want to be a big drinker, right? I thought of it in a negative light. And so I just started off, maybe when other kids were getting high and drinking way before I was kind of a little nerdy, still cool, but kind of a little nerdy in the sense that I don't know, I was just more of a late bloomer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. I mean, I just had actually a guy who's still my literal, my best friend today. He and I, got high together for the first time, I think, when we were 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but then I think the difference was that it was clear that some things were different for me in the way that I use substances right away, right? I remember getting high for the first time smoking weed and then being this is the most amazing thing in the world. And for people that smoke weed, that's fine. Do your thing, whatever. I'm not judging, but just even for me, with that, or with lots of things, it doesn't even have to be a substance. Sometimes I just use things in a way that's unhealthy, right? And so right away, I remember trading my skateboard for another bag of weed, a few weeks later or something and I love skateboarding, right? Big thing. And so that was, maybe an early sign of things being a little bit different for me. But then things progressed for me pretty rapidly. I mean, like by the end of high school, well, where was I? I was dating this girl, and I don't want to say anything, but anyways, I was dating a girl, and the girl that I was dating, I guess the short version is that there was a lot of, she had a family member that had access to a lot of opiate pain medication, right, through profession, and she needed help sometimes with getting that, and I would help her with that, and she would give me some of the stuff, right? And so that was really how I got going on the opiates. And I really enjoyed that, like I liked the way that it made me feel. I felt more at ease. I felt more just comfortable with who it was that I was, right? And and I was like a sharp, good-looking kid. I don't think most people like thought twice that I had some sort of like substance abuse issue, at least most people from the outside, because I just didn't look like the typical drug user, right?
Yeah.
And anyways, but things progressed for me pretty rapidly, right? So like I'm like maybe when I'm 15, like that was when I first started smoking weed, but then now I'm like 16 and I'm getting all these, like a script a week of some opiate pain medication, taking 10, 20 of them a day or something like that. And then eventually that led to beginning to sniff heroin. And so I started to do that with some degree of frequency, being dependent on opiates also. Basically by the time that I was supposed to be finishing high school, like I didn't, right? So everyone else finished high school. I didn't drop out of high school, but I just had a couple classes I just didn't pass, and I never finished high school that were like government and like very essential required class for finishing high school, right? So,
right.
So that was a drag, and then during my senior year, though, like I had a friend, a good friend of mine whose dad was a Marine, and he like picked me up one day and was like, he like called me and was like, "Hey, do you want to smoke a joint?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so he like came over and like listened to the car, around smoking a joint, and then he like pulls into the Marine Corps recruiting center. I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I have an appointment I have to go to." And I'm like, "I'm not going there." And I was like, "I'll sit in the car," and he's like, "All right, well, whatever, I'm going in." So like he goes in there, he's in for like 5 minutes, and then I was like, "All right, man, I'll go inside." So like I go into the Marine Corps recruiting center, and the next thing we're in there for like 3.5 hours. I mean, the guy that was the main recruiter there, I mean, he could have sold, ketchup to a lady in white gloves or something. This dude was slick, right? Like I went in there like reluctant to go in, and by the time I came out, I was like, "America, let's go!" I was like all fired up, and we were fired up. We were going to sign up. We were going to take like the test that we needed to, and we did. We like went up to Lansing, Michigan, and did like our physical. Took like the ASVAB, which is like this entrance test thing that you need to take. It's like a written test or whatever to figure out what job you might qualify for. And so we did those things, and then come the following fall, I went off to boot camp, and then things like improved for me, because like I was basically like couch surfing on different friends' couches, and it just had, I couldn't hold like a job. I couldn't, I didn't have much, stealing money from family was, stealing in general.
Yeah. You were living an addict's life. I mean, it's not a pretty picture, when you're dependent on drugs and substances. You're going to do all kinds of stuff. I think there's a lot of shame around that, and it's really wrong because, it's when you're in it, you're just looking to, like survive.
Yeah. It's like tunnel vision, where it's like, this is the thing that I need. Right. And it's sadly, for better or for worse, it's just where your head is at, and it's the only thing that you can really kind of focus on. And and to that point too, like I thought for a long time I really was in battle, and I'll eventually fast forward to this part, but when I finally decided to get help, was after the Marines. But because basically, like, I joined the Marines, and while I was in the Marines, I was pretty stable, because there was like a real set. It wasn't like like I went to boot camp and I was definitely sick like the first like week of boot camp, but I mean you're doing so much physical activity, and I was like 18 years old. I mean,
right.
We had a lot more bounce back then.
Yeah.
I have it now, right?
But I was curious about that. So you're sniffing heroin and popping pills and doing everything, right? And then you go straight into boot camp. Did that force you to be clean for some period of time while you were in the Marines, or were you still able to get access to stuff?
No, for the most part, I wasn't using, but it wasn't that intentional. If that
right, it was
right? like I wasn't like I'm in
couldn't.
recovery now, like I say now. Right. It was just like, because I would still, every once in a while, like if the guys went out on the town or something like that, I'd go out with them and get a hotel for the night and have a few beers or whatever. Or like, honestly, there was a handful of times on base where like, I get some weed or something like that.
Right.
Smoke a little bit of weed or something like that. But I definitely wasn't doing any hard drugs. And even when I would like go visit home, like on leave or anything like that, I wasn't doing any drugs, right? And so it provided like, for some years, it provided some additional like just stability in having like a regimen and consistency in my life, which turns out actually today I really thrive on. Like I like chaos and a lot of new challenges and a lot of things happening in my life, but I have a routine. I wake up, I get up about the same time every day. Like, I run every day, like I go back. This is my 306th day in a row running at least a 5K a day. And go do that, go do a workout. I usually do like a little bit of meditation or something, usually during my run. But at some point, just be reflective. And then I get into my day. And then my day at work and home, and I spend time with my kids and my wife and try to really be focused on that and not distracted. And anyways, it's those routines that were really helpful. I didn't know that when I was in the Marine Corps. I just figured it was like, I don't know, like just part of, I had no perspective. I was just like a young kid. I just thought, like, okay, well, I'm just like working hard and this is what my job is now.
Right.
Like, and so the short version is that, I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the infantry. And then because I know that we have time constraints here, I think the more important part of the story is that when I get out of the service, right, that that's when things kind of fell apart for me. Right. So like from, I had like some consistency. I didn't really have like a network of support. I didn't think I had a problem or anything. Right. And when I got out of the service, it started to become very apparent. Right. And I got out, started, drinking and getting high a little bit again. And then next thing you know, I'm back using opiates again. And then next thing you know, I'm using heroin again. And now I'm using IV, heroin, and obviously things escalated quickly at this point in using IV heroin, using coke, and whatever else, right? But mainly, definitely dependent on opiates, and there was, I was like working for myself and like building decks and screening porches and stuff, and so I was like, for at least a decent amount of time making enough money to like kind of support my habit and stuff. But then things just escalated to a point where I couldn't work, right? Because I was only focused on the drugs. And then it was like, I'm selling drugs and back to the stealing and back to doing whatever it is that I could, whatever the ways and means were to get more. And I was focused on that, and I was arrested a lot during that, right? So in the early 2000s-ish, basically like from 2003 until like January of 2006. I was arrested, I think, 13 times. And, I mean, it had gotten to the point where I was just one of those guys that like the police knew, right? They'd be like, Keegan, so they'd see me, whoop, whoop, pull over. And all right, empty your pockets, buddy. And he'd be like, "Why are you guys picking on me?" Blah, blah. I'd give them stuff. And anyways, and I had warrants and things, and it was a really tough period in my life. And it wasn't like some days I didn't want to live that way, and then other days I thought that was really all life had in store for me, and I was okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? And in like even like when I was best intentioned, like I'll give an example, like where I was like trying to get clean because I was always constantly, it'd be like going hard in the paint, using a lot, and then I'd be like, all right, I need to just try to get clean, right? And so like one time, for instance, I went up to Marquette, Michigan, which is on like the banks of Lake Superior. It's where Northern Michigan University is, and I had a few friends that went to school up there. And so I went up there, and a couple of them had graduated from there and continued to live up there. And so I went up to go be with them and to try to like clean up, and was there for a couple of days, like going through withdrawals, very uncomfortable, just trying to cold turkey it, and then, faked falling down the stairs. So, it's all icy and snow way up there. And so I faked falling down the stairs with my friends at work, right? I'm home sick while he's at work, being a responsible adult.